Alright? You just time traveled to Manchester, 1842, and let me tell you, you've screwed up big time. See, you thought the Industrial Revolution was all steam engines and economic miracles, right? Wrong. It's tuberculosis and child labor wrapped in coal smoke, served with a side of your boss owns your literal soul. You've landed in the greatest economic transformation in human history, and your life expectancy just dropped to 27 years old. That's younger than most people's first existential crises nowadays. I'm your guide through this nightmare. Think of me as the world's most pessimistic tour guide. And today, we're going to explore why your soft Starbucks drinking, ergonomic chair-sitting body would last exactly one shift in a textile mill before it completely gave up on life. Let's paint a picture here. Your morning starts at 4 a.m. Not because you want it to. Not because you're some kind of productivity bro, but because a factory whistle screams like a demon that just stubbed its toe on the gates of hell. This sound isn't a gentle good morning. It's a sonic assault that says get up or starve. Peasant. The sun won't be up for another 3 hours. In winter, the sun's basically ghosted the entire city. It's like living in a permanent twilight zone, except instead of weird plot twists, you just get pneumonia. You roll out of bed, and by bed, I mean a wooden plank you share with 3 other people. Not 3 other people you're related to, necessarily. Just 3 other warm bodies, who also couldn't afford actual housing. Your bedroom is 8 by 10 feet. For context, that's smaller than a modern prison cell, and it contains you, your spouse, your kids, and your coworker Steve, who snores like a freight train and smells like sadness. The walls literally sweat, not a metaphor, actual condensation from too many people breathing in too small a space. It's like living inside someone's mouth. The window, if you're fancy enough to have one, is permanently fogged up with the collective despair of industrial capitalism. This isn't a home. This is human Tupperware. But hold up. Before you head to work, you need breakfast, and I use that term loosely. Very, very loosely. Your breakfast is porridge. Gray, watery porridge that looks like it's already been eaten once. It tastes like what depression would taste like if depression were a food group. Sometimes, if it's your birthday or Christmas, or the factory owner feels generous for literally no reason, you get bread. Rock hard, dark bread. That's probably 50% sawdust and 50% we're not gonna ask questions. You eat this standing up because, and here is the kicker, you don't have a table, no chairs, no time. The factory whistle has spoken, and the factory whistle is basically a deity in this world. A cruel, punctual deity that doesn't care about your digestive system. The factory, late to work, docked pay. Late twice, you're fired. Fired. You starve. It's that simple. The employment contract here is basically show up or die. No middle ground, no working from home. No him feeling a little under the weather today. You're either productive or you're dead. Those are your options. So you scarf down your sadness porridge, throw in clothes that haven't been washed in 3 weeks, because water costs money and time. Costs money, and everything costs money except dying, which is free, and you join the river of humanity flowing toward the mills. And that's when you see it. The factory. It's like someone built a cathedral to suffering. A massive brick beast belching black smoke into the sky like it's trying to personally block out the sun. And honestly, it's succeeding. The whole city is covered in a layer of soot so thick that white shirts turn gray in an hour. Birds avoid the area. Plants die. Even the rain is dirty. You walk through the gates, and congratulations. You just entered your personal hell for the next 14 hours. Let's talk about your coworkers, specifically the ones who are 8 years old. Yeah, you read that right, 8. Little Timmy here, and his name is definitely something like Timmy or Billy or some other diminutive name that makes you one now weep. Timmy's job is to crawl under the machinery while it's still running to pick up loose cotton. You know, the machinery with exposed gears and zero safety features. The machinery that absolutely does not stop if a small child gets caught in it. Timmy works the same 14-hour shift you do. He started when he was 6. He'll probably be dead by 12, either from being crushed by machinery, developing black lung, or whose skin-it-all body gave up from exhaustion. Child mortality rates in these factories are what we'd call apocalyptic nowadays. But here is the thing that really twists the knife. Timmy's parents sent him here on purpose, not because they're monsters, because they're desperate. His wages, and we're talking pennies here, make the difference between his family eating or not eating. See, this is the genius of industrial capitalism in its raw, unregulated form. It doesn't just exploit you, it forces you to become complicit in exploiting your own children. You're not just a victim, you're part of the machine, literally and figuratively. Meet Sarah, 11 years old, been working here for 3 years. Her job, she's a scavenger. Sounds adventurous, right? Wrong. She crawls under running looms to clean up cotton waste. The looms are moving at full speed. One wrong move, and well, there's a reason she's missing 2 fingers on her left hand. Sarah hasn't been outside during daylight hours in 3 years. She enters the factory in darkness, works under artificial light. And by artificial light, I mean some candles, and maybe a gas lamp, and leaves in darkness. Her skin is the color of paper. She's developing a hunchback from crawling. She coughs constantly. Everyone coughs constantly, but hers sounds wet and wrong. She makes 3 shillings a week. Her adult male co-workers make 12. Same hours, same conditions. But hey, the factory owner explains it perfectly. Children are cheaper and their small hands are better for detail work. Translation: we can exploit them harder for less money, and they're too young to organize a strike. Lunch break. Finally, some relief. Right? Wrong again. Chief, you get 30 minutes. 30 minutes to eat, rest, and contemplate every choice that led you to this moment. You can't leave the factory because the gates are locked. That's not a metaphor, they literally lock you in. Fire safety. Never heard of her. Your lunch is whatever you brought from home. Usually more bread. Sometimes cheese if you're living large. Maybe an onion if you want to get fancy. You eat sitting on the factory floor because there's no cafeteria. No break room. No concept that workers are humans who might enjoy eating food while not covered in machine grease. The guy next to you is eating his lunch despite the fact that his hand got caught in a loom this morning. His fingers are wrapped in dirty cloth. He's still bleeding a little. He didn't go to the hospital because, surprise, there's no workers' compensation. Getting injured means you don't work. Not working means you don't eat. So Hayes here, bleeding into his bread, trying to figure out how Hayes can operate machinery with 3 working fingers. Let me introduce you to Margaret. Margaret is 38, but looks 60. She's been working in textile mills since she was 7. That's 31 years of breathing cotton fibers and chemical dyes. Her lungs sound like a haunted house. Every breath is a wheeze. Every cough produces something you don't want to examine too closely. She's eating an apple, a small, bruised apple that cost a quarter of her daily wages. This is her celebration food because yesterday was her daughter's birthday. Her daughter, who also works in this factory. Her daughter, who is 9. Margaret tells you a joke while she eats. It's not funny, but you laugh anyway. So what else are you gonna do? Cry? Everyone's already doing that. The joke is, why did the factory worker cross the road? He didn't. He died of exhaustion before he made it home. Dark humor is all these people have. You either laugh at the horror or you drown in it. The afternoon shift is when things get existential. You've been standing for 9 hours. Your feet have transcended pain and entered some new realm of suffering that doesn't have a name yet. Your back feels like someone's been hitting it with a hammer. Your hands are bleeding from where the rough cotton has rubbed your skin raw. The noise is permanent. Now a roaring, clanging, mechanical scream that's burrowed into your brain and set up residence. You can't hear yourself think. You can't hear the person next to you, even if they're screaming. The machinery doesn't stop. Ever. It just keeps going and going and going. Like some capitalist perpetual motion machine fueled by human suffering. And here is where it gets truly demented. You start to hallucinate. Sleep deprivation plus malnutrition plus constant noise plus physical exhaustion equals your brain basically giving up on reality. You see things that aren't there. The machines start to look alive. You swear you just saw your dead grandmother operating the loom next to you. Time becomes meaningless. Are you in hour 10 or hour 40? Dos sit mater. This is where I need you to really understand something. This isn't ancient history. This isn't some medieval torture chamber. This is 1842. Charles Dickens is alive right now, writing about exactly this. Your great-great-great-grandparents probably lived this. This is the foundation, the literal foundation of modern Western wealth. Every comfortable thing in your life, every labor law, every weekend, every reasonable work hour, someone died to get you that. Multiple someones, thousands of someones who worked themselves to death in factories, exactly like this one, so that eventually, after decades of strikes and protests and literal battles with police, you could have a 40-hour work week and bathroom breaks. Finally, the factory whistler screams again. 14 hours, you made it. You're free. Except, you're not. You stumble out into the darkness. It's 8 p.m. The sun set hours ago. You haven't seen daylight since yesterday evening. You join the stream of broken humans shuffling back to their human storage units. Your body hurts in ways you didn't know were possible. Your fingers are bleeding. Your lungs are full of cotton dust and God knows what chemicals. Your ears are ringing from the machinery. You smell like industrial grease and despair. You are, in every meaningful sense, a zombie. But wait, there's more. You get home to your 8x10-foot room, and guess what? There's work to do here too. Someone's gotta prepare tomorrow's awful porridge. Someone's gotta try to wash clothes in cold water with no soap. Someone's gotta pretend this life is normal so the kids don't completely lose hope. Your spouse has been working the same 14-hour shift, just in a different part of the factory. Your kids have been working too. Everyone's exhausted. Everyone's coughing. Everyone's too tired to even talk. This is family time in the Industrial Revolution. Silent, exhausted coexistence, while you prepare to do it all again tomorrow. And the day after that. And the day after that. 6 days a week. Every week. Until you die. Which, statistically, will be soon. Harry's. Something that'll mess you up. Scientists today can still see the effects of the Industrial Revolution in British DNA. The stress, the malnutrition, the pollution. It literally changed people's genes. Epigenetic markers that got passed down through generations. Your great-great-great-grandparents' suffering isn't just history. It's encoded in your biology. The average worker in 1842 Manchester was 5 inches shorter than workers are today. Their bones show signs of malnutrition and constant stress. Their teeth fell out by their 20s. They had arthritis. By 30, if they made it to 40, they were considered ancient. But here is the thing that's somehow beautiful and terrible at the same time. They survived. Not all of them. Not even most of them, but enough of them that you're here today. Your ancestors endured this nightmare, and somehow, through sheer stubborn human resilience, they made it through. They had kids in these conditions. They found moments of joy in the darkness. They told jokes. They fell in love. They fought for better conditions. Every labor law you benefit from. Some factory worker in 1842 would think it's a literal miracle. The 40-hour work week. Overtime pay. Safety regulations. The concept that maybe children shouldn't operate heavy machinery. They'd think you're lying if you told them about weekends. So here is what I want you to take away from this horror show. The next time you complain about your job, and you should, by the way, if it sucks, remember that your working conditions exist because thousands of people literally died to make them possible. The factory acts, the labor movements, the strikes that got crushed by police and soldiers, the workers who starved during strikes because they believed that maybe, just maybe, people deserve to work less than 14 hours a day. The next time you clock out at 5 p.m. and actually get to go home and rest, think about little Timmy who never saw sunlight. Think about Margaret and her wheeze laugh. Think about Sarah with her missing fingers. You're not just lucky to live in the modern era. You're the recipient of a century of people fighting and dying so that work wouldn't literally kill you. The Industrial Revolution built the modern world, but it built it out of human suffering so profound that we're still processing the trauma generations later. Every comfortable thing in your life is built on a foundation of people who had nothing and still managed to dream of something better. So tonight, when you go to bed in your own room, in your own bed, after working a shift that didn't permanently damage your body, think about the ghosts of Manchester, 1842, and maybe appreciate the fact that you didn't have to crawl under machinery while it was running just to earn enough money to eat great porridge. Sleep tight, Buttercup. You earned it. The factory workers who built your world. They never did. Alright, so you survived your first week. Congratulations. You've earned absolutely nothing except the right to do it all over again. But truly, you get Sunday off, right? I mean, this is supposedly Christian England, the land of church bells and moral superiority. God rested on the seventh day. So obviously workers get to rest too, right? Oh, you sweet summer child. Let me tell you about the most insane theological debate of the 19th century. Whether or not workers deserved a day off. Factory owners, good Christian men who went to church every Sunday, by the way, had a genuine crisis of conscience about this. And their conclusion, the Bible says, idle hands of the devil's workshop. Therefore, making you work 7 days a week is actually saving your soul. I'm not making this up. This was a real argument. Rich dudes literally stood up in Parliament and said, if we give workers a day off, they'll just drink and gamble and become morally corrupted. We're doing them a favor by working them to death. The Factory Act of 1850, almost a decade from where we are now, finally mandated that factories had to close at 2 p.m. on Saturdays. Not a full day off, just Saturday afternoon, and factory owners acted like this was the fall of Western civilization. One factory owner literally testified that giving workers Saturday afternoons off would destroy the competitive advantage of British industry and lead to national ruin. Translation: if I can't exploit people for a full 7 days, my yacht fund might suffer. Let me introduce you to a real piece of work, Reverend Joshua Worthington. Actual clergyman, owned 3 textile mills, preached every Sunday about Christian charity while paying children 2 pence a day to risk their lives in his factories. His favorite sermon topic, the dignity of work, had stand in his fancy pulpit, in front of his fancy congregation, and explain how manual labor was a divine calling and how workers should be grateful for the opportunity to serve. Then he'd go home to his mansion, built with factory profits, and eat a dinner that cost more than his workers earned in a month. But here's the kicker. He genuinely believed he was a good person. He wasn't twirling a mustache and cackling about worker exploitation. He thought he was doing God's work by providing employment. The cognitive dissonance was Olympic level. He wrote pamphlets about the moral hazard of paying workers too much. His argument: if workers aren't enough to be comfortable, they'll lose their work ethic and become lazy. Poverty keeps them virtuous. I'm gonna let you sit with that for a second. This man looked at starving children and thought, yes, this is character building. He saw women dying of tuberculosis in his factories and thought, well, heaven awaits the righteous. He paid starvation wages and called it teaching fiscal responsibility. And he wasn't unique. There were hundreds of guys like him. Thousands, probably, all convinced that the system that made them rich was actually a moral good. So what did workers do on their precious few hours off? They got absolutely hammered. And honestly, can you blame them? Gin palaces. These were basically dive bars that made modern dive bars look like luxury spas. Were packed every night. Workers would spend a significant portion of their wages on alcohol, because what else would they gonna do? Save for retirement. There was no retirement. You worked until you died, which was usually before you got old enough to need retirement anyway. The temperance movement looked at this and said, workers drink too much. We must ban alcohol. Workers looked back and said, we drink because our lives are unendurable. Maybe fix that, but no. No. Clearly the problem was the alcohol, not the soul-crushing labor conditions. Classic. Here is a story that'll break your heart. Thomas Mackenzie, age 34, worked at a cotton mill. Every Friday, payday he'd go to the gin palace near the factory, not to get drunk, but to buy one drink. One single drink that he'd nurse for an hour. You know why? Because that was the only hour of the week where he felt like a human being instead of a machine part. He'd sit there, sipping his gin, talking to other workers about literally anything except work. They'd tell jokes. They'd gossip. They'd dream about impossible things, like what if we could work only 12 hours a day instead of 14? Then he'd go home, sober, and give the rest of his wages to his wife for food. He died at 36. Lung disease, left behind 4 kids. The Temperance Society used him as an example of the evils of drink because he spent money at a gin palace. They didn't mention that he died from breathing cotton dust for 23 years. They didn't mention that his drinking problem was 2 drinks a week. They just said, "See, workers can't handle money responsibly." Let's talk about something that shouldn't be controversial but absolutely was. Bathrooms. Bathrooms. Early factories didn't have them. No, seriously. You worked 14-hour shifts with no bathroom facilities. You either held it for 14 hours or you found a corner somewhere and hoped nobody noticed. Women had it worse. Obviously. They always do in these situations. Female workers would literally develop bladder infections and kidney problems from holding their urine all day because there were no private facilities and leaving your post meant getting fired. When workers finally started demanding bathrooms, factory owners, I kid you not, argued against it. Their reasoning, bathroom breaks would reduce productivity. Let me repeat that. They thought human beings needing to urinate was a productivity problem. Some factories compromised by allowing 1 bathroom break per shift. 1. And it was timed. You got 5 minutes. If you took longer, you were docked pay. Imagine having diarrhea in that situation. Actually, don't imagine it. It's too horrible. But it happened. Constantly. Constantly. Because food safety wasn't a thing, and everyone was eating sketchy food, and sanitation was a distant dream. Workers would literally soil themselves at their stations because they couldn't afford to take bathroom breaks, and then they'd have to keep working. 4 hours. In their own filth, and factory owners would complain about the smell. The audacity. Let me tell you about Mary. Mary Kellerman, age 23, worked in a textile mill. Got pregnant. Couldn't afford to stop working because her husband, also a factory worker, didn't earn enough to support them both. So she worked through her entire pregnancy, standing for 14 hours a day, breathing toxic fumes, operating heavy machinery, while growing a human inside her. She went into labor during her shift. Read that again. She went into labor during her shift. The foreman told her she could go home after she finished her quota for the day. She had 4 more hours of work. She was having contractions. He said, "If you leave now, don't bother coming back." So Mary, in active labor, worked for more hours. She walked home, gave birth on her bedroom floor with the help of a neighbor, and was back at work 3 days later because there was no maternity leave. There was barely a concept that pregnancy was a medical condition requiring rest. Her baby died at 6 months. Probably from malnutrition because Mary couldn't produce enough milk. She was too malnourished herself. She never took a day off to grieve. This wasn't unusual. This was normal. Women regularly gave birth and went back to work within a week. Infant mortality in factory towns was over 50%. More than half of babies born didn't make it to age 5. And society's response was basically, well, that's just how it is. Maybe don't have so many children if you can't afford them. As if workers had access to birth control. As if they had any control over their lives whatsoever. Oh. But the factory owners were doing something charitable. They created Sunday schools. Sounds nice, right? Teaching poor kids to read and write. Wrong again. These weren't real schools. They were indoctrination centers designed to teach working-class children that their position in society was divinely ordained and that questioning authority was sinful. The curriculum was basically reading but only the Bible, writing but only Bible verses. Just enough to count your pitiful wage as obedience. The main subject kids were taught that rich people were rich because God favored them. And poor people were poor because they lacked moral virtue. They were taught that suffering built character. They were taught that questioning your boss was equivalent to questioning God. It was genius in the most evil way possible. Create a system that destroys people, then teach their children that the system is actually good and their suffering is their own fault. Some Sunday schools were literally run by factory owners who taught kids during the day and then employed those same kids in their factories during the week. The Sunday school teacher who said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth," was the same guy who docked your pay for coughing too much. July 15th, 1844. The Darwin Mill disaster. An entire floor of a textile factory collapsed during a shift change. 73 workers were on that floor. 56 died. Most were children. The factory owner's response: structural failure, act of God. Nobody's fault. No compensation for families. No criminal investigation. No safety improvements. Workers organized a funeral procession. 56 coffins, most of them child-sized, marched through the streets of Darwin. Thousands of people lined the streets, weeping. The factory reopened 3 weeks later. The owner actually had the audacity to complain that the disaster had disrupted production schedules and demanded the remaining workers put in extra hours to make up for lost productivity. Lost productivity. 56 people were dead, and he was worried about quarterly profits. But here is the thing that haunts me. This disaster barely made the national newspapers. It was just another factory accident. They happened constantly. A few dead workers was Tuesday. The public had become desensitized to industrial death. It would take another 20 years of disasters, protests, and literal riots before the government finally passed meaningful safety regulations. 20 years. Thousands more dead. All because the people making money off the system saw no reason to change it. 1843. The Preston strike. Workers at several cotton mills demanded a 10% wage increase and a reduction of the workday from 14 hours to 12 hours. Reasonable, right? 2 fewer hours of daily torture and slightly less poverty. The factory owners refused, not because they couldn't afford it. Business was booming, but because they believed that giving in to worker demands would set a dangerous precedent. So workers went on strike. The strike lasted 6 months. 6 months without wages. Families starved. Literally starved. Kids died. The sick died. The elderly died. The factory owners waited them out. They had savings. They had investments. They had food security. They could outlast people who were already living on the edge of starvation. Meanwhile, they published newspaper articles calling the strikers ungrateful and lazy and radical agitators trying to destroy the British economy. After 6 months, the workers gave up. They went back to work at the same wages, same hours, same conditions, except now they were weaker, sicker, and had buried their loved ones. The factory owners called it a victory for rational economic policy. But you know what? Even though the strike failed, it scared the owning class. It showed that workers could organize, that they could resist, that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't accept this forever. It planted seeds. Here is something that'll restore a tiny bit of your faith in humanity. The movement that finally started changing things. It started with people who saw the children, not politicians, not economists, not even most workers initially. They were too exhausted and beaten down to fight. It was middle-class reformers who visited factories and saw 8-year-olds missing fingers, who saw 10-year-olds with spinal deformities from crawling under machinery, who saw children who'd never played, never learned to read, never experienced childhood, and something in them broke. People like Lord Shaftesbury, an aristocrat who could be just enjoyed his wealth, became obsessed with factory reform after visiting a children's workhouse. He saw kids being beaten for working too slowly. He saw them sleeping in the same rooms where they worked. He saw their twisted bodies and dead eyes. He went back to Parliament and fought for 20 years to pass child labor restrictions. Factory owners called him a socialist, a radical, an enemy of British prosperity. He kept fighting. The first meaningful Factory Act, 1847, limited children's work hours to 10 per day and banned children under 9 from factory work entirely. 10 hours was considered a victory, and 9-year-olds could still work. But it was progress. Tiny, insufficient progress. But progress. So why am I making you sit through this horror show? Because this isn't ancient history. This is the foundation of the world you live in. Every time someone says, regulations hurt business, remember that regulations means children shouldn't operate heavy machinery. Every time someone complains about the minimum wage, remember that without it, wages would drop to whatever keeps you barely alive enough to work. Every time someone says unions are obsolete, remember that literally every workplace protection you have, every single one exists because workers organized and fought and sometimes died for it. The 8-hour workday, workers fought for that. The weekend, workers fought for that. Overtime pay, workers fought for that. Safe working conditions, workers literally died for that. The concept that maybe pregnant women shouldn't operate dangerous machinery had to fight for that too. None of it was given freely. Every single worker protection had to be pried from the hands of people who profited from exploitation. And those same forces still exist today, still trying to roll back protections, still arguing that treating workers like humans is bad for business. The Industrial Revolution showed us what happens when capitalism has no restrictions, when profit is the only value, when human beings are just another resource to be used up and discarded. And yeah, it also gave us technological progress and economic growth, and eventually a higher standard of living. But the cost The human cost was astronomical. So tonight, when you finish your 8-hour shift and go home to your own bed in your own room, remember, someone died so you could have that 8-hour shift. Someone died so you could have workplace safety rules. Someone died so you could have bathroom breaks. Someone died so children don't have to work in factories. The comfortable life you have isn't natural. It isn't the default state of capitalism. It's the result of over a century of people fighting against a system that would happily work you to death if it was profitable. Your great-great-great-grandparents might have been Mary Kellerman, working through labor, or Thomas Mackenzie, savoring 1 drink a week, or little Timmy, crawling under machinery, or one of the 56 people who died when Darwin Mill collapsed. They suffered so you wouldn't have to. The least you can do is remember them, and maybe, just maybe, fight like hell to make sure we never go back. The Industrial Revolution wasn't good or bad. It was both. It was necessary, and it was horrific. It built the modern world on a foundation of human suffering so profound we're still processing the trauma generations later. But here is what keeps me up at night. We're not done. Worker exploitation didn't end with the 19th century. It housed mob at 2 different countries, different industries, different people. Right now, someone is working in conditions that would make Manchester 1842 look tame, making your smartphone, making your clothes, making your cheap furniture. The factory didn't go away. It just moved somewhere. You don't have to look at it. So yeah, be grateful for labor laws. Be grateful for unions. Be grateful for the weekend and the 8-hour day and workplace safety. But also remember that the fight isn't over. It's just your turn now. Don't screw it up, Dr. Andre Kovner, reminding you that history isn't just something that happened. It's something we're still living with. Every single day. Sleep tight. The workers of 1842 never did.